Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead. If I was a smarter person, I would have preloaded my notes and made sure I had them. But we're good now. So, here we go. Let's start off with prayer. I'm glad to see all of you here. It's fantastic. We've got a pretty extensive prayer list. I think some of these, though, are going the right direction, a favorable direction we want. Like, so Liz Denton, obviously doing well. Just praying that it will stay that way. She's got a checkup, I think, in a year from now, so that's pretty solid. What else? What's not on this list that we need to be in prayer for? We talked about Olivia. Let me write that down. So Olivia is Mike and Faye's granddaughter. Is that right, Mike? Okay, so Olivia, is there any new update on how that's going? Maybe today. So Olivia is pregnant and they're inducing, and so we're just hoping it all goes well as it should. Awesome. Richard, I saw your hand.
Yes, our daughter Karen down in Hempstead was walking in from the car to the church. She tripped, fell, and cracked her hip, and they screwed it back together yesterday. She's home today. It's really not a big deal, you know.
Okay.
And then our daughter-in-law had a hip replaced the same day within 2 hours up in Fort Worth, and the other Karen was down in Houston. But they're both doing real well. And the hip replacement, she was in at 6 o'clock that morning and out at, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock that evening. It's just day surgery on hip surgery replacement. Nothing to it.
They expect you to bounce right back, right? What's your daughter-in-law's name?
It's Susan, Susan, Karen.
Susan. Yeah, I got Karen. Okay, cool. So just recovery there. So hip replacement went good, right?
Everything's going good.
Okay. So Karen fell and broke hip. She's recovering at home, going good. And then Susan had hip replacement. So far, going good. So we just pray for both of them have recoveries. And
Broke something off and they just had to screw it back on.
oh, okay. Broke something off. Screw it back on. A bunch of robots up in here. I like it. Just snap it back in there. It'll be fine. It reminds me of playing. Okay, nope, done. Any other things to add? All right. Well, if that's it, we'll go ahead. Oh, we got one way. Go ahead.
Continue prayer for Callan Longer.
Yep. Praying for Callan.
He had scheduled surgery to remove the rest of the tumor.
Right.
Hopefully that went well.
That did go well?
We
Or we don't know yet?
not,
Okay.
just praying that it did go well and that everything's
Okay.
right.
So we're keeping Callan Plumley in prayer. Just that everything has gone well and will continue to go well. He's supposed to have an upcoming surgery. We're not quite sure what the results are yet. but hopefully it's going well and all of that. Because I know last I heard the doctor had more work cut out for him than he thought he did, so it wasn't going to be an easy thing to deal with, but he still thought he could get it. So that's what they're doing for him. Okay? Anything else? All right. Well, if there's nothing else to add, let's go ahead and go to the Lord in prayer. Almighty God, we come before you just in awe of who you are. You are so perfect in every way imaginable. You are perfectly righteous, perfectly just. You are perfectly merciful and perfectly loving. God, in every way that we can imagine, you are 100%. And we just praise your name as the only true God. God, we ask that you will bless our time this evening. This is such a great opportunity that we have to press pause on the week and on all of our busy schedules and all of the things that we've got going on, and really just come together as your family and to focus on you and to reflect on what really matters in life. And what a privilege that is to be able to do. God, it's a privilege to be able to bring to you the things that are on our hearts and the things that are on our mind. God, that you can know and hear what's on our hearts. I want to lift up Olivia, that she is being induced, and we just pray that everything will go well in that situation, and that we will have a healthy baby, and that everything will go well with that, and be with all those that are involved. God, we want to lift up Karen, and that she pray that she recovers quickly and is able to be back at full capacity. And we want to lift up Susan as she recovers from her hip replacement. And so we lift those up to you. We know that you are active in each one of their lives, and that you are bringing things that are for their good out of those, and we praise you for that. We also want to lift up Callan Plumley to you, and just be with his family, be with him, and be with all the doctors and the medical professionals that are working with him. God, we just ask for recovery there. We ask for him to be able to recover, that them to be able to get all of the tumor out, and that, God, you will receive glory for that as he grows up, that will become part of his story of your faithfulness to him before he could even utter a word, and we praise you for that in advance. God, we ask that you bless our time this evening in your word, and bless each one of us in the remainder of this week. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right. So here we go. Are you ready? Oh, don't be asleep on me already. I haven't had time to put y'all to sleep. What a good evening it is to be able to be together. So I want us to go ahead, and we're going to be back in the Gospel of John. We've been going through the 7 I ams of Jesus. And these are 7 statements for those of you just tuning in. 7 statements in which Jesus says, I am, and he fills in the blank there. These statements tell us a lot about who he is, and tells us a lot about our relationship to him. We've talked about the I am as a direct play on Moses in the burning bush, when Moses says, who am I supposed to say is sending me? And God tells him from the bush, I am is sending you. So it's a direct play on this. And in a lot of these ways, John's gospel, as we've been discussing, is really primarily one of his big takeaways that he wants his readers to understand is that Jesus is claiming deity. He's claiming to be God. He's claiming to be Messiah. He's not claiming to be just a good old guy. He's not claiming to be a social justice reformer or a prophet. He is claiming to be God incarnate in the flesh. And though he doesn't explicitly say, I am God, and move along, all the other things that he says and all the other things he does, there is no mistake among the Jews over what his claims are. But it's a really beautiful way it works out in the Gospel of John, because we have these claims and these actions and going on, and then we get to see the audience kind of wrestle with it, the people that are immediately there around, and they wrestle with, what are we supposed to do with this? Is it true? Is it not true? Some remain undecided. Some, like the Pharisees, are like, absolutely not. But some believe, and some follow. And so we're doing our 7 I ams in this. Do you guys remember any of the I ams? Bread of life. The light of the world. Good. The good shepherd. What was I heard it over here. The door. Good. The resurrection and the life. Good. The true vine and the way, the truth, and the life. Good. So we got them all. Let's say them all together, because I'm hoping we're going to walk away from the end of this series and we're all going to be able to just rattle them off like nothing. You ready? I am the bread of life. Okay, y'all say it after me. Let's just do it that way. You say it after me. Huh? I'm short one? Oh, we had true vine in the back. Yeah, I tried to hit it. Yes. No, I can't hear either, and I don't have an excuse. So, here we go. I'm with you. Here we go. Let's say them all together. So, I'm going to say it, and then you repeat it after me. You ready? I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, truth, and life. And I am the true vine. There you go. All right. Those are in order in which he tells them. We're going to be in John chapter 10, if I didn't already say that. We're going to be looking at, take a guess which one? We talked about bread. The door. The door. John 10 is a weird one because the door and the good shepherd are really interwoven together. He says them almost back to back, like right in the same thing. And each one of them, though, has some intricacies to it and some other details to it. So I'm going to do my best to try to stick to the door. And then next week we will talk about the good shepherd. And I hope that we're going to learn some different things about each one of them. But they are really interwoven together. And I honestly, if you're going to camp out in any of the chapters, 10 is probably one of my favorites in the Gospel of John to just camp out in and just read. It would either be 10 or it'd be 15. But 10 has a lot to it. And so it's really important. So John 10 is recorded as part of a dialogue that takes place after chapter 9, obviously 9, 10. But in chapter 9, at the end of it, we have the healing of the blind man. There's a blind man that is healed, and then there's a trial of this blind man where the Pharisees are trying to get to the bottom of what's really going on, and it doesn't end well for the blind man. I guess you could argue that it doesn't go well for the Pharisees either because they're still lost. But nonetheless, moving on we go. So let's just go ahead and pick up into the text. What I want you guys to be thinking of as we're going through this, especially as we progress into John's gospel, put yourself in different people's shoes. Sometimes there's a tendency that we just read this and we just kind of go with it. But really try to imagine being one of his disciples standing there around these teachings and around the different things that he's doing, right? As he continues, especially as we go forward, because he starts being there's a little more calling out to the Pharisees as the time gets closer to, right? And if you're one of the disciples and your expectation is Jesus is going to come and be the conquering king, the last thing you need him do is poking the religious leaders and telling them that they're not doing a good job, right? The last thing, and so all of these teachings that he's doing, and as he goes, it's like it's not what was the expectation. We see the tension starting to rise between the Pharisees and Jesus. We see emotions start to run high. We see the Romans probably on the sideline getting a little anxious about what's happening and what's going on with all these big signs and these crowds that are starting to follow Jesus. So just kind of put yourself into the tension a little bit. Allow yourself to feel the angst, I guess you could call it, that's going on in this text. So this is Jesus. He's talking to the Pharisees as we open up in John 10, verse 1. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. This figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So Jesus again said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved, and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." So what stands out to you? Is there a phrase or words that jump out to you? Don't say door, because we're talking about door. I guess you could say shepherd if you want to. But what stands out to you? Like, what's your takeaway? I like seeing where people's heads are at when we read through a passage together. What's jumped out to you, if anything? Not all at once. The door's being opened. Good, good. That's pretty significant. The door is being opened. Kind of, yeah, yeah. It's in that form. Yeah, that they're lost. He has to kind of double down and explain it further, right? He has to keep going with them. Okay, good. They lived a sheltered life. That's why they didn't understand it. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right, there you go. Yeah. Good. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good. Good. I like that. And that connects to a lot of what we're saying. So she was talking about how the connecting point to Jesus asking his followers and saying, "Hey, who do people say that I am? And who do you say that I am?" And Peter finally confesses that you are the Christ. You are the Son of God. You're the one we've been waiting for, essentially, right? And Jesus' responses to him is that, "Blessed are you, for flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven," right? "And given to you are the keys to the kingdom of heaven." And that's talking about the gospel being preached, right? That Peter is the one, if you look in Acts chapter 2, Peter's the one who preaches the first gospel sermon, and the door is open to the kingdom of God, to the church, right? Good. Cool. So let's stick to this sheep and shepherding thing a little bit more. So what's interesting about it is that this isn't an uncommon theme, right? David being a shepherd, and some of the Psalms talk about sheep, or Israel being the flock of God. So it's not necessarily an uncommon theme that Jesus is drawing on when he's using these analogies, these illustrations, to try to drive home his point. Interestingly, that I find interesting at least, is that even though that this is still a common theme, the shepherd idea, that title, that role, that position, isn't a high one, right, in society. Typically speaking, for a family who has sheep or has goats or whatever, typically the lowest member or pretty close to the bottom member of the family is the one who's responsible for the sheep. They're the ones that got to go out. And so it's interesting to me that even though it has this significance symbolically with God and the nation of Israel, it still isn't all that big of a title position in this time. But it would have been a familiar enough concept for Jesus' audience to understand. As he does with almost everything in the gospel, when you really start to understand the Old Testament and what they're coming out of, Jesus positions himself as the fulfillment and the completion of everything that's been going on in the Old Testament. And that's part of this claim that he's making about his position. He's not claiming just to be a reformer or a prophet. He's positioning himself as God, the fulfillment of all of those things. It's interesting, if you look at like the Sermon on the Mount, at the very end of it, the people marvel because he teaches as one who has authority. And even in here, as he's teaching in John 10 and as he's talking, the way in which he's discussing with the other Pharisees and the other religious leaders, and all of those things indicate this idea of authority that he thinks that he holds, the claim. So, what do you know about sheepfolds and flocks and all that? No? Nobody? All right, that's fine. Not me either. It's all right. Yeah, the sheep know the owner's voice. So typically, in Jesus' time, the sheep are put up in a sheepfold, which is essentially a pen. And this pen was typically made out of stone, though sometimes it was made out of wood. Most of the references I saw were saying it's, at least a good 4 or 5 foot fence. And it would be common for them to have let vines and different things grow across the top in order to provide extra protection for the sheep. And so the sheep, when they were done being in pasture, they would be brought into the sheepfold and they would be there. And that was their safe spot. That was where they would lie down. There was one door, only one way in, one way out. And there was a person whose job it was to sit there all night. They would lay there across there, and they were the barrier to entry for anybody who wanted to come in and do harm or take. And it was also the barrier to exit because the sheep didn't want to cross them. And he was the door. I found it interesting to find that it was not uncommon for multiple flocks to be in certain sheepfolds, right? Hence the idea where Jesus is saying that the sheep know the voice of the shepherd. So sometimes if there were multiple flocks sitting in the sheepfold, one shepherd would come in, he'd be allowed to come in, he would call his sheep, and his sheep would follow him out into the pasture, and there may still be another flock or a second flock still waiting for their shepherd to come in. We'll talk a little bit more about the sheep hearing the voice next week as we talk about shepherd. But we have this set of comparisons that we want to look at. And the first one, like I said, we'll talk about next week in thief and shepherd. But today I want to look at this idea of the sheepfold and the flock. And we can say that they're kind of pretty close to the same thing, and yes, but I think Jesus is drawing on a comparison that he's trying to get us to understand. I think it's also really, really important that we keep this narrative in its proper setting, right? We can draw a conclusion to the same idea of what Ruthie was saying about it, linking it to Acts and linking it to the church. And I think that teaching obviously holds water, right? That teaching is there. But there's another message that Jesus is drawing on that sits in the context alone. It doesn't need to get pulled out and made to think about us and the church. Though, like I said, that teaching holds water. It's not necessarily wrong. But I want us to look at the context. So as we start looking at the context and the narrative, let's think back to the blind man who was healed. This would put us in John chapter 9. The blind man is healed, and I love the trial, to be quite honest with you. I love the whole back and forth, and I love the Pharisees questioning and just how that drama unfolds. It's pretty awesome and pretty good, so I encourage you to read. That starts in chapter 9, verse 13, so later on, go and read. Basically, these guys have the blind man brought to the Pharisees, and they're like, this man is claiming that he was blind and now he's healed, and the Pharisees, it's a Sabbath day, and that's a no-no. So the Pharisees are like, hey, hold on a minute. How did this happen? Who did this, and what's going on? And so the man tells them the story the best he can, and the Pharisees are like, hey, he's lying. He's got to be lying. This is a trick, because nobody who was born blind can now see. So surely he wasn't born blind. Let's call his parents in. Let's bring his parents and have them come and testify. And his parents come, and by the way, they're reluctant. They don't want any part of this because they know the tension that we talked about earlier. They know what's going on, and they don't want to be banned from the synagogue. So they don't want to be there from the temple. They don't want to be there. They don't want to testify. They don't want nothing to do with it. And they ask, has he been born blind? He's like, that's our son, and he was born blind. We don't know. And they're like, well, how did this happen? And they're like, ask him. He's of age. We don't know. So then they pull the guy back in once again, and they start to question him again. And look at verse 27. This is the blind man speaking. He answered them, I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? And they reviled him, saying, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from. That's really, really important. Who are the disciples from? That's really important when we're starting to understand the difference between the sheepfold and we're understanding the difference in the flock. Skip down just a little bit more with me to verse 35. Jesus' response to the trial. So after the trial is over, this kind of just escalates it, right? They don't want to be Jesus' disciples. They're trying to find a way to figure this out and figure out what's going on and it not be Jesus. And so they finally tell this guy, you're out. They kick him out. And don't water that down to think they just kicked him out. They basically excommunicated him, right? They banned him from the temple. He's no longer Jew, right? We're done. He's out. Verse 35. Jesus had heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? And he answered, and who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? And Jesus said to him, you have seen him. That's kind of love that. You have seen him, talking to the formerly blind guy. You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. Jesus said, For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may become blind. Some of the Pharisees near him heard him say these things, and said to him, Are we also blind? And Jesus said to them, If you were blind, then you would have no guilt. But now that you say, we see, your guilt remains. I love that line at the end, right? There is, where your guilt remains. He's basically saying, you claim to know it all. You've got no ignorance, right? You can't, on that last time, claim, well, we didn't know. Jesus is saying, you said you had enough information to make an informed decision, and you chose not to make the right decision. That's essentially what that phrase is saying. In other words, he's saying, if you would have said that we don't know yet, that we're not sure yet, but because you said we see, we know, you're guilty. Interesting. And then he pulls on and keeps going into the part we read at the beginning. So there's this pull that is happening between the fold of Judaism under the law of Moses and the flock of God. There's this pole that Jesus is pointing out that's happening. He is the door that calls out of Judaism and into the flock of God, into the people of God, right? And it happens pretty much point blank in the blind man, right? He's kicked out of the fold. He's kicked out of the safety that the law and the prophets all claim to give him. And Jesus welcomes him into the flock of God. And this is important because this is the bigger work that Jesus is saying he's doing, right? The time has come where the sheepfold has served its purpose. It's done what it was designed to do. But now there is access to something better. The more full realization of what God is doing. Redemption, Jesus. All of those things are there. Like I said, it would be a mistake, I think, to try to just go ahead and jump straight over to the context of he's the door to the church, he's the door to... Understand in this context, and again, that teaching's not necessarily wrong. The teaching holds water for countless other scriptures and stuff like that. But here in this, Jesus is specifically dealing with this time that he's in, where he's here to call that out. He's signaling the fulfillment. And he talks about that fulfillment in the Sermon on the Mount, doesn't he? In chapter 5, after he goes through the Beatitudes and talks about the salt and light, he says, don't think that I've come to get rid of the law and abolish the law. I haven't come to get rid of it. I've come to, what's it say? Fulfill it. You what? To seek and to save. Good. Absolutely. So we should see Jesus as the door to a better way, to God's way. Jesus is the door to a truly greener pasture. Jesus is the door to greater safety, greater security. It's different than any other fold, any other pasture. Being in this flock leads to the fruit of the Spirit we read about in Galatians 5. Love, joy, peace, patience. Who doesn't want more of that in their life? Leads to rest. Real rest. Right? Jesus talks about that when he's talking about laying down our yokes, or taking on his yoke, laying down the burdens, right? Come to me, all you who are tired and weary, and take my yoke upon you. For my yoke is easy and light. He's calling them into something better. He's calling us to something better. And I love this. Go. The door to life, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's really what this is all about, right? This is really about what is life really, what can it measure up to? And that's, I think, I love John 10:10 because it causes us to think, right? The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. So either A, Jesus is lying, or my definition of life might be wrong. And I'm going to tell you that our definition of life is wrong. What the world tells us is the path to life is not real life. It's pseudo-life. It's temporary life. Paul talks about the two paths. Every other choice goes down the one path, and the ultimate destination of every single one of those is death. Only this way leads to real life. And of course, this shouldn't surprise us because God is the author of life. If anybody knows what the definition to true life ought to be, it ought to be Him, right? It ought to be the one who made it. He knows better than we do what we were made for, how we were made to be. what we were supposed to take joy and delight in. The beautiful thing is that even though this sits in that cultural context, this isn't just for the disciples, and this isn't just for the blind man that got kicked out of the temple. This is for all of us. Look at verse 16 of John 10. And this is why I think it's important that we keep it in its context, because Jesus is filling in all the gaps for us. Verse 16, and I have other sheep that are not of this fold, that fold being Judaism. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. And so there will be one flock and one shepherd. The mission is for all of us. Good. It gives us nourishment from what? Okay. So that's another good one, right? When you talk about, Jesus tells us that he stands at the door knocking, right? If anybody will let him in. So that's a good one too. So the question really comes back down to that same idea, right? Have you ever noticed that all of these go to the same place? Like every time, it's about what are you going to trust in? What's going to be the definition of life that you're putting your hope and faith in? It's always this question. It's been the question since the garden. What will you put your trust in? And it's so easy, and I say this a lot, so I'm sorry in advance, but it's so easy looking in the mirror first too. I guess it's important that it's so easy to say what I trust in. It's so easy to say, yeah, obviously it's God, but when rubber meets the road, is it really? Right? When really big storms happen in my life, am I the one trying to batten down the hatches and get through it and grit my teeth? Or am I really trusting that He's got control of it? Am I really trusting Him? Do I believe it? So this would imply, verse 16 would imply to us that we would be the sheep that are all over the place. We would be the scattered sheep. Right? Jesus is calling the sheep from the fold of Judaism out into the flock of God, and He says, but I've got other sheep. They're not of this fold, but I got to go get them. I got to round them up. What pastures do we sometimes find ourselves being tempted to? And I love this analogy, that old expression that says the grass is always greener, right? And that's what we do a lot. Full disclosure, that's what we wind up doing, right? In this world, it gives us an almost never-ending buffet line of green pastures, promising to give us life, promising to give us security and safety, promising the world. Yep. Yes. 100%. Yeah, so being saved is going in and out by Him, going into the pasture by Him, and also the safety that He provides. Good. Good. So what are some pastures that we wind up chasing? I've talked too much, so this is the jump in this thing. Let's go. Wealth, money, good. Good. That's a big one that we chase, right? That's a pasture that's out there a lot, and it says, hey, if you can just have enough, then you can do whatever you want. Everything's yours. Life is found in wealth and money. And it looks tantalizing. It looks pretty good, right? And it's always, at least for me, and I don't think I'm alone in this, I think this is pretty common, is it's not so much the money, right? Because, what's a bunch of paper? Nobody cares about the paper. But it's what the money can give you or what it promises to give you. I found in life the reality behind that saying that more money, more problems. That is real. More money, more problems. But that's what happens, right? And we can look to other people who have been at where we want to get when it comes to money and wealth. We can look at those people and be like, man, didn't quite pan out for them. And I think it's worse too because I think that, we've got the social media age, and that just makes it to where, you always see the best of everybody, right? And I think that plays into this hand because if we saw what really was happening in some of these pastures, if we saw what people's life was really like, we would be like, yeah, I don't want none of that. But because we can go on our social media and just scroll through all these people living it up, I'm like, I don't see the downside here. It's because we only got a snapshot of a view of it. Good. So what other pastures do we chase? Money's not the way. At the end of it all, it's going to be that. The best advice I heard, I'm coming back, I swear. I had a tangent. I apologize. Okay, good. So so maybe the pasture of self.
The problem with it, though, is the pastures, they all come from somewhere, right? So it's forgetting where that pasture came from is really the problem. It's not the pasture. It's
Good.
not the fame. It's not the fortune. It's forgetting where it came from, who it came from.
Good. So the issue with a lot of the pastures is the source of it, like we're remembering where it comes from. Yeah, remembering who it comes from. That's good. That's good. In self, let's back up a second. In the pasture of self, what's the problem with that? What do you think? Where does that go wrong? The physical mind? Yeah. If you follow self, and that's what we chase, I'm hoping for all of us, it doesn't take long to realize that the self is very unreliable. When you follow self, you are subject to emotion. And that's the reality of it, I think. When you follow self, then it's whatever feels good, sounds good, looks good in that moment and in that time. And I think it's pretty self-evident how futile that is, right? Then you really are just chasing the wind. I remember a movie, one of my favorite movie lines is like, do I really look like a guy with a plan? I'm just a guy chasing a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do with one if I caught one. But that's following the God of self. That's chasing the pasture of whatever it is. And Jordana found it again on social media. And we were debating on whether they stole it from me or I stole it from them. I have no idea, but it's a true point nonetheless, is that the flesh doesn't care, ultimately. The flesh doesn't care about your tomorrow because the flesh doesn't get to go into tomorrow with you. You don't get to take this flesh with you into the afterlife. This isn't going into eternity with you. And it has no care about what state you're in when you get there. It can only think of the immediate. So what else? So we've talked about money, wealth, self. What is the ultimate goal behind a lot of those? Pray without ceasing? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because it's that connection, right? You've got to stay connected to keep your mind on it. That's why this is important, right? Being together as often as we can, being in the Word when we're apart, being in prayer, all of those things, because it connects us to the real door, right? Instead of chasing whatever other pasture that we're going to. The underpinning behind all these pastures, because you can talk about your jobs, career, you can talk about family. Those things aren't bad things, but if they become the pasture, the source of your life, everything, then they can become bad things because they aren't built to handle that. They're not built for that kind of wear and tear. Our relationships with our spouses and our kids and our parents, those weren't meant to endure and to hold us up. Because underneath all of this, when we're talking about pasture, is the idea of the basic human needs, right? We've got the need of safety, the need of provision. Like those are basic human needs, right? In Matthew 6, Jesus tells us not to worry about all those things because God is taking care of those things. We don't always see the hows and the what have yous. Sometimes we're blind because we sit there and like, well, I went to work and I earned this money. It's like, yeah, but who gave you the job? Who gave you the breath in your lungs? Who gave you the mental capacity to logic and reason your way through your job? It was all God. You're welcome, right? That's the reality of it. That's what it is. It wasn't you. But all of those things are about those core needs, right? And then you've got the other needs that are slightly above that. They're not the physiological needs, but they're the psychological ones, right? The need of belonging, the need of value and self-worth and self-esteem. All of the world promises us, and it's important. I love the remember who they came from. Because they didn't come from a source that actually cares about making sure you belong and you're valuable and your self-worth. It's a dog-eat-dog. Whoever can get the most, it's the world. It's the way the enemy operates. Jesus comes and says, I'm the door to something better. I'm the door to something real. That real relationship, that real value, that real self-worth, self-esteem, all of it, that real physical provision. That's all God. And we've got just a snippet of it there in Genesis before it all went. But that's what Jesus is calling us back to. He's calling us back to that, to being restored in His image. And He's the way to it. Y'all have any other pastures, any other passages that go along with us? I love the entry point to this. And then next week as we talk about the shepherd, it kind of takes a whole different turn in the idea of leading. And we'll talk more about that next week, about who are we following. And I want be thinking about this week who you follow. Because we all follow. This is the truth of humanity. Everyone follows something or someone. There is no, I don't follow anything. There's no such thing. That is an illusion. Everybody follows someone or something. And then ask yourself, is who we're following worthy of being followed? Good. Good. Yeah. 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 And I think that that's an important point because I just alluded to it really quickly, but I think it's worth making sure it's understood that family is not bad, work's not bad, having nice things, enjoying life. Like, in Ecclesiastes, Solomon talks about, that's what you have, and it's from God to be able to enjoy things. The problem comes in when those things take priority over God. When you start to rely on those things as the pasture that you're going to feed on and build your life on, right? That's when those things become bad. And that's where Jesus is talking about, if you don't love me more than you love your mom and your dad, your sister, your brother, your job, your family, anybody and everything, then you're not worthy of me. And that's hard for us to sit with, but it's a reality, because what will be the anchor point? And only God can sustain. When we're talking about relationships, it's important to realize that your relationship with God is number one, because only He will never fail you. Only He is continually faithful, no matter what it looks like, as you go through things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's true. And that's honestly, I think that's true in every area, right? When you talk about money, like there's no such thing as enough. Like how much is enough? Well, there's always that one other thing that now I can't buy, right? And when it comes to our job, like how far up the corporate ladder do you have to get before you feel like you've got enough? Then you're CEO, and it's like, wait a minute, what was it all for? Or you've got the nicest house on the block. Well, that's great. Now what? Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's something that takes retraining, right? And that's where we're trying to go through the door. And it's hard because we've been conditioned, because the world out there tells us that these are all the way, right? That's always the famous thing that people will say whenever you're like, oh, well, there's no such thing as enough money. There's no such thing. And people will usually respond, well, that's great, but I'd sure like to give it a try, right? Mm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. 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 So it doesn't answer all those relational things about value and worth and good. Okay, good, good. All right. Think about the door. Think about Jesus being the door that calls us out, calls us into something better, into something real. Any other thoughts? All right. Well, let's say a prayer and we'll wrap up. God, we thank you for being the door to something better, the door to calling us back. God, just the fact that you have offered redemption at all is just mind-blowing. Because I think if most of us are honest, we would have just thrown us all away and started over. We would have tried again. But God, your trying again was to call us back to you, to provide the perfect sacrifice, to be able to offer us mercy and still maintain your perfect justice. God, I ask that you will help us to evaluate what we're putting our hope in and what we're putting our trust in. I ask that you will help us to evaluate who we're letting in our lives and by what door we're seeking those core values of belonging, self-worth, and our physical needs. God, help us to recognize that your hand is in all of that. God, I thank you for each one here. I ask that you bless us in the remainder of this week. Help us to grow closer to you. Help us to be salt and light to the world around us, pointing them to the better way that we have found. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right, guys. Thank y'all.